Welcome back, everyone. We're really diving deep today into a pretty unique piece of Americana,
Absolutely.
Schilling Manor in Kansas.
Yeah, and it's such a fascinating little story
Yeah.
during the Vietnam War.
Yeah, so it was
A community for wives and children.
a community of wives and children of deployed soldiers to Vietnam. So no servicemen,
Just families.
just families.
Yeah.
And to help us understand the story, we're taking excerpts from a podcast with Mark Curtis of the Military Brats Registry and author Donna Moreau, who wrote the book Waiting Wives, The Story of Schilling Manor.
Right.
And so our goal today is to really understand how this extraordinary community came to be and what life was like for the women and children who called it home.
Yeah. What was it like for these families to live in this kind of environment at this time?
Yeah, so first of all, how did this even get started? It seems like a pretty novel idea for that era.
What's interesting, as America's involvement in Vietnam escalated, more and more servicemen were being deployed. Right. But the military hadn't really developed systems to address the housing needs of families left behind during those deployments.
So you're saying families were kind of on their own to figure out their living situation?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And, that's where this amazing person, Lorraine Vogel, comes in. She was a military wife stationed at Fort Riley, and her husband was part of the Big Red One,
Okay.
the very first Army battalion with troops on the ground in Vietnam back in '65.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So you can imagine the kind of weight and uncertainty those families felt.
Oh, I bet.
And Lorraine, she had some experience in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
So she realized that there was this huge need for stable housing
Right.
for families of deployed soldiers. And she learned about Schilling Air Force Base,
Okay.
which was being decommissioned, and it was located not too far from Fort Riley.
Got it.
And get this, the base had 735 Cape Heart houses,
Whoa.
less than 5 years old,
Wow, brand new.
just sitting vacant,
Brand new. That's crazy.
empty. Yeah. So Lorraine was pretty amazing. She had her husband arrange a meeting with Colonel Scanlon, the officer in charge of closing the base.
Wow.
And amazingly, Colonel Scanlon was immediately on board with this idea of using those houses to house the families.
Wow. So he
Done.
was really empathetic to the situation.
Yeah, he really was. And in fact,
Seems like a good guy.
he even authorized 12 families
Oh, wow.
to move in before it was even officially approved,
Really? That's incredible.
just to give him some immediate relief.
Yeah, so that's how Schilling Manor got started. So let's paint a picture here. We've got this whole military base, the housing, the roads, the buildings, but the servicemen are thousands of miles away.
Right.
What was the atmosphere like at Schilling Manor?
It was truly unique. You had all the structure of a military installation,
Right.
but it was completely populated by women and their children.
Wow.
They were essentially maintaining a home front, while their husbands were fighting a war.
That's crazy.
It must have been quite an interesting dynamic,
Yeah. Very unique.
Yeah,
So Donna Moreau's book focuses on the experiences of three women.
right?
Can you tell us a little bit about who they are and why their stories are so central?
Sure. One of the main perspectives is, of course, Donna Moreau's own mother.
Right.
She lived at Schilling Manor in 1971 when Donna's father was in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
So Donna kind of has that personal connection.
Yeah, she was there.
She was there. Then, of course, we have Lorraine Vogel, who we just talked about.
Right.
She's really the catalyst.
Right. The founder almost.
Yeah, exactly. And then the third key figure is Bonnie Johnson.
Okay.
And her story is particularly poignant because her husband had been missing in action since 1965.
Oh, wow. So 2 years before.
Yeah, 2 years before.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Especially back then, communications and stuff like that.
You can imagine the uncertainty and the grief.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And, her husband was only the 5th American listed as MIA in Vietnam at that point.
Wow.
So, for many back home, the war was still a bit abstract.
Yeah, they didn't.
Yeah. It wasn't real yet.
Yeah.
But for Bonnie, it was very real. And she wanted to be surrounded by people who could understand what she was going through.
I see.
So she sought out this community where the Vietnam War was a shared experience,
Yeah.
even though their individual experiences differed greatly,
Sure. So the book really focuses on these women and their journey through this time at Schilling Manor.
Right.
But the title of the book is Waiting Wives.
Right.
But the children obviously played a huge role in this community as well.
Yeah, they're absolutely central to the story.
Right.
Donna Moreau talks about the women of that era
Uh-huh.
as the hat and the glove generation of military wives.
Interesting.
And they really felt this strong sense of duty,
Okay.
not only to their husbands, but to their country.
Yeah.
And their way of contributing to the war effort was by maintaining a stable and supportive home environment
Makes sense. Yeah.
while their husbands were away.
Yeah, and the kids kind of got swept up in this whole thing, too.
Oh, absolutely.
I-
They were essentially raised in this very unique and temporary world,
Yeah.
you know. Their experiences, their anxieties, their ways of coping are all reflected through their mother's stories.
Right.
There's actually a really powerful quote from Connie, one of the wives Donna interviewed.
Okay.
She said, "Everything I do to look for my husband, I did for my children, because it's them that suffered. It's the little ones who suffered."
Oh, wow.
And that really shows how concerned these mothers were for their kids' well-being,
Sure, of course.
during this time of separation and uncertainty.
Right.
So,
Yeah, so Donna Moreau, she lived there for over a year in her teenage years.
right.
How did that shape her perspective and lead her to write this book?
Well, it's interesting because her time there was relatively short,
Yeah.
just 13 months, between the ages of 15 and 16. But she describes it as a very seminal time in her life.
Interesting.
She moved around a lot. As a
Yeah.
military brat, attended 16 different schools.
16 schools.
That's-
Wow.
But Schilling Manor really left a lasting impression on her.
Wow, so it must have been a pretty powerful experience.
It was.
Yeah.
It was a time of intense emotions for her, obviously.
Sure.
The anxieties of the war,
Right.
her father being away,
Yeah.
combined with just the normal challenges of being a teenager.
Of course. Yeah.
She talks about learning to drive, her first love.
Mm.
She remembers the tension that would fill the air whenever the sedan pulled into the neighborhood.
Why a sedan?
Well, because that usually meant news from Vietnam,
Oh,
which could be bad news.
I see.
And she even remembers specifically when a friend's father was wounded,
Oh, wow.
And she also talks about the contrast between the structure of life when her father was home
Okay.
versus the more fluid dynamic when he was gone.
Mm.
Her mother suddenly had to take on everything,
Right.
and the rhythms of their family life were disrupted.
Sure.
And, for a teenager going through so many changes already, that kind of upheaval must have been really impactful.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So bringing this story to life, the story of Schilling Manor and all these individual stories must have been a huge research undertaking.
It was.
Yeah. How did Donna Moreau go about doing all this research?
Well, one of the first big challenges was just finding these women.
Right, finding the wives. Yeah.
Finding these women who had lived at Schilling Manor, decades earlier.
Right.
There were no lists or easy ways to contact them.
Sure.
So she started by placing ads
Okay.
in military publications
Yeah,
and on websites related to the Vietnam War.
that makes sense.
But the real breakthrough came with the Military Brats Registry website.
Okay.
This online community helped her connect with over 140 people
Wow.
who had lived at Schilling Manor at some point.
That's great.
It was amazing. Yeah. So from there, Donna traveled extensively for 3 or 4 years,
Wow.
interviewing wives, children, even some of the husbands who had served.
That's dedication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she also made a point of doing interviews in Salina, the town near the base,
Oh, God.
to get those local perspectives.
Right, the people who saw this happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
Okay.
beyond those personal stories, were there other things about life at Schilling Manor that she wanted to capture?
Oh, yeah. Through her interviews, she heard all these secondary source stories.
Okay.
Stories about the incredible community support among the women,
Uh-huh.
the unique struggles of foreign-born wives
Right.
who are adjusting to life in America
Yeah.
during wartime,
Sure.
and also stories about really supportive military commanders,
Okay.
who went above and beyond for
Yeah.
the families. Now, the problem was
Yeah.
these stories were hard to corroborate.
Sure, it's like collective memory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Donna came up with this really clever way
Yeah.
to include them in her book.
How did she do that?
Well, she created this fictional committee of wives
Yeah.
who were organizing a fashion show.
Interesting.
And through their conversations and the issues they faced,
Mhm.
she was able to weave in these broader themes and anecdotes.
Oh, I see. Clever.
It was a way to share these important stories
Right.
while acknowledging that they were based on collective memory
That's cool.
rather than on verifiable accounts.
Right.
I
understand.
Yeah.
So there's this one story that I remember reading about
yeah.
about A farmer.
Oh, yeah, the farmer from Lawrence, Kansas.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
That's crazy.
He read about all these waiting wives living at Schilling Manor
Right.
and decided to head over there to find a wife
Really?
to help him with the planting season.
Wow. That's a unique way to find a wife.
It is.
Wow.
It's a great little anecdote.
It is.
You know, it shows how this community was perceived
Right.
by the outside world.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. So,
So finding Lorraine Vogel, the woman who started it all,
right.
sounds like it was a bit of a detective story.
It really was. After Donna did some radio interviews in Salina about her research,
Okay.
she got a call from someone who had saved old newspaper clippings about Schilling Manor.
Oh, wow.
And one of those clippings
Yeah.
was a 1966 article from the Milwaukee Journal.
Okay.
And it talked about the origins of Schilling Manor.
Uh-huh.
And it mentioned Lorraine Vogel's name
Oh, wow.
and her husband's hometown, Fargo, North Dakota.
Really?
Yeah, it was a long shot,
Right.
but it was a lead.
Sure.
So Donna contacted the Fargo newspaper
Okay.
and placed a notice
Wow.
explaining her research and asking for help finding Lorraine.
And somebody knew her.
Amazingly, someone did.
Oh, wow.
And Donna got an email from Lorraine's brother.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So she finally found her.
She did.
Wow. What was Lorraine's reaction?
You know, she was shocked.
I bet. Yeah.
She had no idea about the lasting legacy of Schilling Manor.
She was probably like, Schilling Manor. What's that?
Yeah, she had left early on
Right.
when it was still in its infancy.
Yeah.
And she thought it might have closed down, shortly after she left.
Wow. So she had no idea how big it became.
No idea.
Hmm.
But when Donna told her about the impact it had
Yeah.
on all these women's lives,
Mhm.
Lorraine was really moved.
Wow.
Donna actually got to visit her in Texas later.
Oh, wow.
And Lorraine shared a ton of stories from those early days.
That's great.
It was really amazing that the woman who started it all
Yeah.
ended up being one of the last and most important interviews for the book.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So Schilling Manor obviously existed for a specific period tied to the Vietnam War.
Right.
What's there today? Is there anything left?
Yeah, Schilling Manor still exists, but it's a private housing development now.
Okay.
After it closed in '77, the properties were abandoned for a while.
Wow.
Then a railroad company bought them,
Uh-huh.
and eventually they were sold to private developers who renovated the Capehart houses.
So those houses are still there.
They are.
Wow.
Yeah, people live in them now.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, the street grid is the same,
Oh, wow.
but the names have changed.
Okay.
Donna actually heard from a homeowner who found the old street name Scenic Street on his furnace.
Really?
Yeah, and he contacted her
Oh, that's so cool.
to learn more about the history.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah. So how does it look now compared to back then?
Well, when Donna lived there, it's pretty uniform looking,
Yeah.
kind of typical military housing.
Sure.
But now it's much more lush,
Yeah.
People have done their own landscaping and the houses have their own character.
Right. So it's not so cookie cutter anymore.
Right, exactly.
Oh.
But some of the original community buildings are still there, like the community center,
Oh, wow.
the gym, the remnants of the old airport,
Wow. That's crazy.
kind of echoes of the past.
That's so interesting. It's like the physical space is still there, but its purpose is so different now. Donna Murdo calls it a Brigadoon community.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
It really is like that mythical Scottish village that appears for just one day every 100 years.
Right?
Schilling Manor just kind of emerged out of necessity
Yeah.
and then faded away as the situation changed.
Right.
And its closure in 1977 was
Yeah.
a direct result of the end of the Vietnam War
Right.
and the changes in military family support.
Sure.
But, for a good 8 to 10 years, it was at full capacity,
Right. Wow.
often with waiting lists. So it really played a crucial role for these families.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think what's amazing about Schilling Manor is that it's just this incredible example of resilience.
Yeah.
These families coming together, creating this community in a really difficult time.
It's a testament to their strength.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a reminder that military families throughout history and even today face unique challenges. And they often make sacrifices that most people don't even realize.
Yeah. And they find ways to support each other.
Right?
And build communities.
Exactly. So
Oh,
I think if listeners want to learn more about these stories,
yeah,
resources like the Military Brats Registry are a great place to start.
definitely.
So thank you all for joining us on this really fascinating deep dive into this unique part of American history.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.